Well, friends, it's that time of the month, the first of the month. Now, I don't mean free cheese from the federal government because I don't qualify for any of that free stuff, as you guys probably don't either. It's time for me to debunk the Gun Violence Archive's bogus numbers from the previous month. In this case, we're debunking June's numbers. We've been doing this 5 months so far. This is our 6th month. So I kind of got a halfway point recap that I'm going to share with you guys. So this is going to be a pretty interesting program that you're going to witness today. First, guys, go check out my friends Attorneys on Retainer at attorneysonretainer.us. Don't trust an insurance company with your self-defense, guys. These guys are the ultimate self-defense program offered by a law firm. This is literally on the front page of their website. These guys are going to cover you whether you are charged or convicted of a criminal act, take a plea deal, use an illegal weapon or firearm, hope you're not. They provide coverage in all 50 states, have a 24/7 emergency line. 100% of your criminal and civil defense fees are covered through trial. If you go there now and sign up, you will get $50 off your one-time sign-up fee. That's $50 off the $100 sign-up fee. Go there now, use my code FTATF. Again, that's attorneysonretainer.us. So guys, the first thing I want to do is I want to break down and provide a little bit of clarity on the different types of shootings. As the Gun Violence Archive incorrectly does, they throw all of these shootings into one bucket because it gives it a sexy feel for what the mainstream media and politicians are looking at, and especially the anti-gun enterprise on the left. It gives them what they're looking for to be able to drive memberships, to gain money, make money, to present anti-gun laws. It fabricates numbers using actual numbers, so there's a hint of factual data in there, but it's all represented improperly. So that makes it still a lie, even though actual numbers build up the numbers and make the numbers and create the quote mass shooting numbers. The numbers that build that are factual. It's actual things that happened and they're not made up. But to give the impression that we have this crazy epidemic of people running around through schools, churches, synagogues, grocery stores, and just randomly shooting a bunch of people at any given moment at every time of the day, it's just an outright lie. In fact, to imply that is a lie in and of itself, even though you're using factual data. What I wanted to do, because there may be some new viewers watching, and I want to provide this sense of clarity a little bit better so everybody understands my thinking behind separating these shootings into the categories that I do, which I think are the correct categories. I call my method the motive classification method. I start out with the bulk of what we have, which is confrontational attacks. And I'm calling these attacks because, let's face it, guys, these can still be, I think, an attack and something that maybe somebody doesn't die, right? It could be with a knife. The lady who stabbed and I say lady, why am I calling this thing a lady? The person that stabbed the 3-year-old boy in the face and the back and killed him, again, that was done with a knife. I considered that an attack. It certainly wasn't a shooting, but it was random. And I would put it in the classification of what I'm doing here. So again, understand my method of thinking. I'm really big on motive, not means. Again, motive, not means. I don't care what they use. I care what they were thinking when they decided to take a human life. So let's go through these. A confrontational attack makes up the lion's share of what we see every month. However, most of us are not in any real danger. They are sparked by a fight, disagreement, grievance, or retaliation. The attacker knows or knows of the person or group they attack, even if they just met. Bystanders usually are only at risk of stray bullets. In other words, the bystanders are typically not the target, although innocent bystanders get hit because these guys can't aim and they're randomly firing their little Glock switches and other little guns off just randomly in the air in the general direction of whoever they're having a shootout with. They typically occur at late night or early morning hours. I don't mean when some of us are fishing. I mean when some of us are sleeping, like 2 a.m. in the morning. Location is not planned unless it's retaliation. In other words, they are not going to locations hoping something pops off. They go to street parties, house parties, block parties. They they're selling dope, they're selling drugs, they're selling firearms, stolen firearms. They're doing all kinds of things between criminal activity and just partying and they meet up with people, egos get involved, and they're usually drunk or high or just stupid, and they have disagreements, and of course with their egos involved, they can't just walk away and they can't talk their way out of it, so they start shooting at each other. That location was not planned. Now, the reason why I say retaliation is if somebody shot at them. Well, most of these shootings, a lot of them, are retaliation for something that happened a few days earlier when they were shot at. So the location might be planned simply because your target is at that location, and that's why they went there. But again, they know the person they're going there to shoot. This is not random. They come from mostly fatherless homes and have no immediate mentor figure in the area or community. Suspects are rarely apprehended, and in many cases you're going to see, especially in these gun violence archive numbers that I break down, you'll see where I mentioned that nobody is talking. What that usually means is there's a shootout, everybody knows everybody knows who did it, but nobody talks. Nobody will say who did it because they're afraid to get shot too. So the suspects are rarely apprehended in these cases unless somebody will rat them out. But they are usually known, just rarely ratted out. And they may experience narcissistic personality disorder from the DSM-5, mostly ego-driven. That's an actual classifiable disorder in the DSM-5 book. So I want to make it very clear that I'm not just saying a lot of this stuff on hunches. A lot of what you're going to see with some of these people or clinically documented things that's wrong in the brain. The narcissistic personality disorder is just something where people can't let things go sometimes. Again, mostly ego driven, but there are some other factors that play into that too. Not saying everybody suffers from that does this, but that's certainly a component. And it's not like they're mentally ill and crazy or whatever. That's just a component from an ego standpoint that sometimes won't let, especially the younger people, let things go or walk away. The next one I want to talk about that we see more often than we should is the domestic attacks. They are not random. The victims are known, obviously. There's domestic things that happen amongst family members, so they obviously know their victims, and the victims usually know the attackers. The attacker rarely attacks those outside the family circle unless it's a bystander that is trying to intervene. That's typically the only time you're going to see any kind of innocent bystander, or maybe you see a stray bullet hit an innocent bystander. But because of where these things typically happen at, inside the home, you're usually not going to get innocent bystanders that are attacked or hit. Attacker usually takes their own life. In many cases, you're going to notice, especially in these GVA numbers that I break down, if I classify it as a domestic shooting, let's say the majority of cases, you're going to notice that after they take their family members' lives, they usually take their own lives. The time of the attack is not specific. Of course, it's going to be when people are home, so you may see a few more of these happen in the afternoons and later in the evenings, but there is no specific time. This could happen in the middle of the day if the spouses or partners attacking each other or at home at the same time. They mostly occur in the home, obviously. This is usually where things pop off, and that's usually where something happens. Even if it's ex-spouses, usually they go to the home of the other one, and that's where they commit their act of atrocity. There are many different personality disorders. There's not one particular one in this case that you can tie to this particular type of shooter. There's not that. It's more emotion driven, things that happen between two people. It could be everything from finances to infidelity to a number of other things that play into that. I mean, it's hard to raise a family, obviously. The next one is rampage attacks. This is the one that the mainstream media would like you to believe that is happening very frequently, because this one is unpredictable, and this would truly put fear in the hearts of Americans everywhere, because we don't know when these can pop up. They are random, not like the other ones. These are random. The victims are mostly unknown. The attacker does not always know who he's going to shoot. In some cases, some of these people start out their rampage killing at home. So some cases you're going to see them shoot their mom, their aunt, their sister, or somebody like that that might be there who maybe try to stop them from leaving and go and commit this crime. So sometimes you see that, but that's not usually where it stops. Obviously, they're trying to leave the house to go commit a rampage killing, and again, in that case, their targets are not known. Everyone present is a target and in danger. No one is safe. That means these people are looking for a high body count. They don't care who they kill. They are trying to kill as many people as possible. They don't care how old, they don't care how young, they don't care what color you are, they don't care what you say, how you look, or how you dress. They are looking for a beating heart, and they want to stop those beating hearts. So they don't care about that. No one is safe in the presence of a true rampage attacker. The attacker seeks a high body count. Location chosen for that reason. In other words, gun-free zones. That's why they go to these places, because they want a high body count. Not spontaneous. The attack is planned in advance. Many times we see the evidence of this in the way of manifestos, journals, diaries, whichever, that they are planning these out for extended periods of time, and they finally decide to carry them out. Obviously, gang members don't do that. They don't sit there and write a diary and plan out to go kill Rodney down at the tennis courts at 2 a.m. in the morning 3 months from now. That just doesn't happen. The attacker expects to die during the attack by others or by their own hand. I'm not saying that they want to die, but they expect to get shot during that attack, and in some cases, if nobody does, they take their own lives. You rarely see a true rampage attacker or rampage killer who survives and is locked up and apprehended without having their life taken or taking their own. Usually happens during busy time of day. The reason for that, again, high body count. They're not attacking Rodney at the tennis courts at 2 a.m. in the morning. That's simply not where they're going to do it, because there's usually not hundreds or thousands of people there. They're attacking malls, churches, restaurants, things of that nature that are going to have lots of people at peak times of the day, because again, the high body count is what they seek. They usually attack in a gun-free zone for less resistance. We've seen memoirs, we've seen manifestos, we've seen diaries and journals that have specifically said that. More recently, the Nashville shooter, who said they chose this school because it was a gun-free zone and they knew they would meet resistance in other areas that were not gun-free zones. They typically come from a broken home. They typically come from a broken home. You've seen that in my book, How to Make a Monster. Usually the home life is not the greatest. Some of these people will dispute this and say that, oh no, our home life was great, but in many cases it obviously was not if you scratch the surface a little bit. Psychotropic drugs are usually involved. Mood-altering drugs of some sort were likely in theirs, and that's going to drive that depression even more and make them manic, make them suicidal, make them homicidal, especially if they're trying to get themselves off of it and they quit cold turkey. Sometimes it makes those side effects a lot worse when you get off of these drugs. It can actually make it worse than if you were never on them to begin with. Mental state, unstable, usually already being treated. Again, whether it be therapy or medication, they are typically on somebody's radar somewhere, from either a psychiatry place, a mental institution, or just somebody who does therapy or maybe prescribes drugs for depression or whatnot, but they're usually documented somewhere from having something. Finally, they suffer from antisocial personality disorder. Again, this is a documented condition in the DSM-5 book. Very important that you understand that these people have something wrong with them in their brain. Not just the fact that they are kind of goofy or silly or different than everybody else. They suffer from an actual diagnosis that's in the DSM-5. And finally, a newer category that I started putting in here is law enforcement. This is not because I believe it belongs here. It's because the Gun Violence Archive incorrectly has started to include law enforcement related shootings in with what they're calling mass shootings. To me, that's just outright stupid. If somebody has, I don't know, maybe they're on the run from law enforcement because they committed a crime. We've seen marshal services who were after somebody because they're a felon who's in possession of a gun. Whole different story. But nevertheless, we've seen shootouts occur where one or two people get in a shootout with law enforcement, and four or more, they meet the magic number for the Gun Violence Archive, so the Gun Violence Archive calls it a mass shooting. That's just silly and stupid, because, as I always say, the media is trying to make it look like we have an epidemic. Why would you include law enforcement related shootouts with mass shootings to make people think there's an epidemic that we might get caught up in? It's very unusual for me to be in trouble with law enforcement. So it's very unlikely that I'll ever be included in that. And if you have the good guys and the bad guys shooting at each other and it's law enforcement initiated, in other words, that maybe what caused the shootout, not saying it's their fault, but they're approaching a known felon or a person on the lam or running from the law, may have initiated that shootout and triggered it and started it. Maybe that shootout would have never happened if law enforcement wouldn't have been trying to apprehend them. I'm not making excuses for either side. I'm telling you, this is a type of shooting that should not be in here. I don't believe it's a classifiable type of shooting like the other three that I mentioned. I think the other three are accurate, but it's important that I put that in here just because we have a place to capture them, because I don't want to throw them in one of the other three buckets just for the sake of doing it. I literally capture every single one of these shootings and talk about every single one. So there's a bucket I have to put them in, and here lately I've been having to put them in the law enforcement bucket. Again, that's an incorrect bucket. So let's look at the shootings as we always do. Okay, if you notice the ones in blue, and you will see a whole lot of those are our standard run-of-the-mill gang-related confrontational type shooting. It's people that are mad at each other, got in a fight at a bar, street corner, house party, graduation party, you name it. Two people didn't like each other, decided to shoot at each other. Not random at all. These people are carrying guns with them on their persons. They get mad at each other and they shoot at each other. Very important we understand the differences in that, because in most of the cases, you and I would not have been at these places. You will also notice that if I can find what time these shootings took place, I include them here. If you notice on the one for Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 10:37 p.m. That's late at night, and you're going to see other ones, one right above it at 1 a.m. So I'm trying to show you that the time of day does matter also. These people are usually not involved in shootouts at the basketball courts or the tennis courts at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. It's usually 2 a.m. times that they're out when most of us are sleeping. You notice the one in pink. Well, that's one of our law enforcement related ones. It was a fight at a dance where 2 law enforcement officers were shot. So law enforcement officers intervened at this dance and a shootout erupted. So while this could be classified, if you notice I put the C in there after the LE, this could be classified as confrontational because there was a fight that triggered all of this, and then law enforcement got involved. But law enforcement's involvement is where more people got shot. So I put both of these on there, and I'm putting it in the main category of law enforcement because, again, that's when more people were shot, and that's when enough people were shot to be classified as the 4 for the magic number of the Gun Violence Archives inclusion in this chart. Let's move on to the next slide. Again, you're going to see a lot of the blue. I'm not going to go step by step on the blue ones because they are the same old run-of-the-mill fight, street fight, bar fight, house party, graduation party. It's the same old stuff that we see month after month after month that every politician and anti-gun person, including the media out there, ignore every single month. They're not trying to do anything about it. They're ignoring it, and this happens all the time. Look at the one in yellow, Kansas City, Missouri. Domestic. Extended family members. This is people, aunts and uncles and nephews that got in a fight in a home, and there were people who got shot. Obviously, you see 2 people were killed and 2 other people were shot. They're very unfortunate there. Next page, more of the same. More of our standard stolen car, Draco, Glock switch was involved, fight, victim not talking, drive-by at 3 a.m., bar fight, drive-by, fight at a gas station, Juneteenth party, block party. So your basic stuff where it's more people fighting, getting drunk, high, arguing, fighting again, shooting at each other, and the same old stuff that nobody is trying to fix, correct, or make any mention of. The next page, look at that, down at the very bottom in red. That's a rampage shooting. That's, you guys may remember that, happened over in Michigan at a splash pad. This person had a mental health issue, as we just discussed earlier, and was using a handgun and shot at some people. As you can see, they did not kill anybody, but they shot as many as 9 people. The suspect was in fact killed. That's a rampage shooting. This is very random. This guy drove up on this splash pad during the day while people were using it. Again, looking for a body count, as many people as possible. So drove up there while this thing was heavily being used, people running for cover, and shot at innocent people that he did not know. Again, meets every single characteristic of what I call a rampage attack. Next slide, we've got another one. Amongst all of our blue, we have one more red one, another rampage killing. This is rare. This is really rare. The news media will make you think that we have tons of these rampage type attacks in 1 month, and we don't. There's months we have 0. We have 2 in 1 month. This is a new one for us. Grocery store, mostly a shotgun, but he had a handgun also. I don't think he used a handgun in this rampage killing, but he did use a shotgun and shot a lot of people. Shot 9 total, killing 4. That's a bad one, and not many people talked about it. I believe the media is creating their own problem now because so many people are ignoring the gun violence archive that these media outlets cite as being their actual source. And then whenever myself and other people dig down and find that it's incorrect and that it's a lot of bloviation, a lot of exaggeration and misleading facts that they're trying to make you think one thing when it's actually another. So when they hear that there's a mass shooting, I believe they're starting to ignore it because this was a pretty big one. 9 people shot, 4 people killed. That was big. And not a lot of people were talking about that. And finally, to wrap up the month, you see we've got more of the blue ones. You see we've got some gang involvement up there. I've told you before that if I put it in quotes, that's because the article said it was gang involvement. That's not me assuming that. Block parties, graduation parties. And then we have 2 of the domestic cases, which are really sad, all right here. The one right there in Dayton, Ohio, it was only the attacker who died. The attacker shot himself after shooting people in the house. And then we have this other domestic one. I put North Las Vegas as not really. If you guys will remember, this was the case where you saw the guy who shot at some of the people in an apartment and then went downstairs and shot somebody else. I'm calling it domestic because this was a weird one. And the media wasn't talking about this one either. This guy went to the apartment to confront his ex-girlfriend. He ends up killing 2 people downstairs. I believe her apartment was downstairs. Goes upstairs. Still not sure what happened, but it's more than likely that these people heard the gunshots and maybe intervened or whatever. Shot some people upstairs. Took the ex-girlfriend hostage. Did not kill her. Didn't shoot her. And took her hostage and took off. He ends up escaping from the vehicle that, because law enforcement was after him by then. He ends up escaping from the vehicle that he kidnapped the girlfriend or the ex-girlfriend. And so she was okay. I say okay. I mean, obviously traumatic. But he ends up escaping. So he didn't kill her. So that's why I say not really. Because no one in his family was killed, but a domestic situation made it pop off. Does that make sense? I mean, he didn't kill his family members. He didn't kill his ex-girlfriend. He killed, let's just call them strangers for the sake of us talking about it. So he killed people that were not family members of his own. But the domestic situation is what made it happen. So that's why I put it as a domestic. Because, again, if there weren't the domestic quarrels within his circle, it's unlikely he would have shot anybody. He was already a bad guy because he'd been in prison before. But I think it'd been 10 years ago or maybe more than that. So, again, the domestic thing, had it not happened, it's likely that these murders may not have taken place either. So let's look at our monthly breakdown. Obviously, you see the very obvious right there, the confrontational shootings. Look at the number of them, 66. We had 44 last month. 44. We're going to show you the monthly breakdown here in a second just so you can see. But as they always say, especially in the northern cities and some of the coastal cities, the warmer it gets, the more crime goes up. And as you can see, we've had only 3 domestic shootings, which that's 3 too many. 2 rampage shootings, very rare. That's the most we've had in 1 month all year long. And then, of course, that law enforcement down there. Now, if you look at the percentages, again, the confrontational are going to dominate our numbers to the tune of 92% is the ones that probably are not a danger to any of us because we wouldn't be in these places at the times that these shootings took place. We were safe in our beds, in our own homes. The next one, domestic, is 4% of the overall shootings in June. Rampage was 3%, with the law enforcement being 1%. Now, I wanted to take the annual data and run it down since we're halfway through the year. So let's look at law enforcement. These are the least amount of shootings that we have. Not going to spend but a minute on these just because I don't think these belong here anyway. Again, I only include them because I think they're included in mass shootings in error. So let's not look at these very long. We've had a total of 4 of those, and that's only been in the last few months that those have actually taken place. Let's look at our rampage. These are the ones that the media would like you to think that all of these other ones are, but it's really not a massive problem. Yeah, I know, one is one too many, I get that, but it's not the problem that the media lies to you. This is a perfect example looking at this slide right here, that instead of 70-something shootings that were rampage shootings in the month of June, there were 2. If you look, we had 1 in January, down to 0 in February, 0 in March, 0 in April. We had 1 in May, and we had 2 in June. So we've had 3 in the last 2 months. Before that, we went 3 months without even having one. On January 4th, we had our first of the year and went almost 5 months before we had our next rampage attack. So in all, rampage attacks are definitely, from a percentage standpoint and a risk standpoint, and especially a risk to people out there that are just running around doing their own business and minding their own business and doing normal things like going to work and going to restaurants and church. It's not a big threat. In fact, if you look, 0.67 rampage shootings per month if we take the 4 that we've had this year and average them out over the last 6 months. That's how many we are averaging per month. So not a major threat, not the lie that the media and my friend Mark Bryant over at Gun Violence Archive would lead you to believe. Now, let's look at our domestic. Again, way too many, but very consistent. We're averaging at least those 3 a month. We had a dip in March of only 2, but 3 of them. Now, granted, guys, these are not the only domestic types of shootings that took place in the United States. These are the only ones that have had 4 or more shootings in them. So there could be 100 more where only one person was shot. Maybe the spouse or the partner was shot. These are the ones that qualify for the GVA website because they made up this number of 4 and said 4 or more people shot or killed, and it qualifies as a, quote, mass shooting. That's why these numbers are here. If you were looking at anything else, any data out there, there's going to be far more domestic than just this. So again, they kind of paint themselves into a corner because they can't really show a lot of the domestic shootings because they have that magic number of 4 that they invented. Let's look at confrontational shootings. This is the real meat and potatoes. This is the real threat, and this is what everybody is ignoring. Look from January to June, how that number goes up, 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 up. It goes down 1 time from January to February, and actually in a lot of states, February is actually their coldest month. So that actually coincides with temperatures. If you look at temperatures, you're usually going to find that that trend is going to follow the temperatures as they go down and then go back up again. So with January having 30, dips down to 23 confrontational shootings in February, up to 32 in March and April, jumps all the way up to 44 in May as temperatures start to increase. We've got 12 more from April to May, quote, mass shootings according to the Gun Violence Archive, and jumps up, spikes massively from 44 to 66 in June, with no end in sight actually. We're probably going to see a good bit in July and August. I hope not. I hope my numbers are wrong and my prediction is wrong, but these numbers are certainly trending in that direction. We're not going to see any kind of real cooling off until probably September or October at the earliest. So how do these numbers play out for the year? Well, look at this. The blue column is the very, very obvious. That's our confrontational shootings. And again, if you look at the title at the top, I'm calling these the MCM, the motive classification method of shootings. I figure I have to classify it as something instead of continuing to say ambiguous stuff that doesn't make any sense. So I finally named it something, the MCM, which again stands for motive classification method. I think this is accurate. I think the motive is determining what the classification should be. The type of weapon used should not be what we use to classify shootings if we're truly serious about fixing the problem and addressing it honestly. So in this case, We've got our blue column confrontational leading the pack. Again, follow that trend. That's usually going to follow the temperatures. Look at our domestic. Again, that stays very, very steady all the way across the board. Our rampage. Remember, the red, the rampage, you see 1 in January, none in February, March, April, 1 in May, 2 in June. That's the column that the mainstream media would like you to think that the blue column is. In other words, all 4 of these different MCM classifications that I point out are all thrown into the same bucket to give the impression that the red column, the rampage attacks, are the real problem popping off all across this country. In fact, if you look at the June numbers, you see that 66 on that blue column. Let's add the 3, the 2, and the 1. That's 6 more. So the mainstream media, the Gun Violence Archive, the anti-gun movement, politicians, the White House all cite this Gun Violence Archive, right? They would have you believe, incorrectly, that we have had 72, quote, mass shootings in the month of June. 72 unpredictable shootings that were random. Nobody knew who was, none of that stuff. It wasn't a fight, nothing like that. Just somebody randomly walking into a grocery store 72 times. So you talk about the effort to make Americans scared. If there truly was 72 people who went around to grocery stores, to churches, to schools, synagogues, restaurants, and just randomly started shooting at innocent people to kill as many people as they could, if there were 72 of those, believe me, it would be a real problem if we truly had 72 of what I call rampage attacks in 1 month. That would be an issue. We're never have been anywhere near that. It's always a couple or less or none that happen. So friends, I'd like to go back and look real quick at what I call the rampage attack. This is the one that the mainstream media would like you to think we're having a ton of. We are not. Again, we're averaging less than 1 a month. More specifically, we're averaging 0.67 of these a month. Where's our real problem at? Confrontational attacks. These are the ones that flood the numbers and make them balloon way worse than what they should be. And I'm going to say this, and I'm going to continue to say this. I will stand on a hill and scream to the top of my lungs until I am blue in the face. Politicians don't care about these young men shooting each other in the streets. They don't care. They don't care about the drive-by shootings. They don't care that people are shot at block parties. Because most of these people are dumb enough to keep voting for the same people who are sitting on their hands not doing anything to help them and not make these communities any safer. These people will continue to vote for the same people who are keeping them in these kill zones and doing nothing to try to help and mentor these people, these young men who have no father figure in their home, no real mentor figure in their home. They're doing nothing. But these politicians keep getting voted back in just because people recognize their name. So they have no real reason to do anything, right? No reason. But yet they're using these stacks of dead bodies of these young men that they don't care about in their own communities. Why? Because they look cool in Washington, D.C. whenever they can vote for the next anti-gun package out there and make Biden or whomever else happy because they voted for them. Nobody ever questions them. Why are you voting for this in your area? But I don't see anything to try to manage the young people in your area to try to mentor them or help them or make them make better decisions in their area. Not a thing. All they get is a pat on the back because they support that next anti-gun bill blindly that somebody else puts up there. Too stupid to realize that people in their own backyard, where their own families go to school, eat, live, are shooting these communities up. I can bet you one thing, they do know what the problem is. They may not address it, but they do know what the problem is. I can bet you this much. Their kids don't go to the tennis courts, basketball courts at 2 a.m. I promise you that. These people know where the problem is. They recognize it, they identify it, and they ain't letting their kids get in the middle of these kill zones out there at 2 a.m. Guys, I will have these charts up on my website, legallyarmedamerica.com. Very soon, we're creating a spot on my website where you can go find these. For now, however, you can go to my Facebook page, Legally Armed America. I believe they're probably going to be on Instagram, on X as well. I'm even going to post them in the community section here on YouTube. So there will be places that you guys can catch these. I want you to be able to share them with other people. Instead of having to always share the video, I want the actual slides available so you can share them with other people. I'll also make these descriptions of the confrontational attacks, the rampage attacks, all of that available to you too, so you can help people start making sense of why and how I break down these categories properly using my motive classification method. Thanks for watching, guys. Please share, please subscribe. YouTube's still taking subscribers from me. They hate videos like this one, so please get the word out if you guys don't mind.
God save the Queen, man.
I'm sorry, I thought this was America.